The day I walked across that stage, my family wasn't lost in traffic or stuck at work. They were at brunch, smiling for a photo that erased me. I told myself I could survive anything if I stayed quiet. But that was the moment I disappeared. I changed my name, started over, and swore I'd never go back, until a letter arrived saying I was the founder of a charity I'd never seen. You learn to be easy to live with before you learn to walk. At least, that is how it happened for me. I was the child who slept through the night the moment I was brought home from the hospital. The toddler who sat quietly in the corner of the grocery cart. The teenager who never slammed a door. My mother liked to tell people I was an old soul, but the truth was less mystical and more practical. I was the structural support beam of the Henderson family. Beams do not make noise. They do not ask for paint or polish. They simply hold the weight of the house so the people inside can stomp around without the roof caving in. By the time I turned 34, I had perfected the art of low maintenance. I was the one who remembered birthdays, the one who mediated the shouting matches between my father and my sister, Jenna, and the one who loaned money that everyone silently agreed would never be paid back. I worked in the administrative wing of a healthcare office, a job that required the same skill set I used at home, filing away the mess, soothing the angry people on the phone, and ensuring the doctors looked competent even when they were running 2 hours behind schedule. It took me 6 years to finish my degree. I took night classes, online modules, and summer seminars, chipping away at the credits while working 40 hours a week. It was a grind, a slow and unglamorous ascent toward a piece of paper that said I was qualified to do the job I had already been doing for 5 years. But it mattered to me. It was the only thing in my life that belonged entirely to me. My name was on the tuition checks. My sleep was sacrificed for the essays. My eyes burned from the late-night reading. So, for the first time in my life, I asked for something. I did not ask for a party. I did not ask for a vacation or a new car. I asked for 3 hours on a Saturday morning in May. I sat my family down 3 months in advance. We were in the living room, the television blaring a golf tournament my father was only half watching. I would like you to come to my graduation, I said, keeping my voice level. I reserved the tickets, one for Mom, one for Dad, one for Jenna. Afterward, I would like to take a photo together, and then go to dinner. I will pay for dinner. Jenna had rolled her eyes, scrolling through her phone. She was 2 years younger than me, but consumed all the oxygen in any room she entered. Jenna was the storm, and I was the sandbag. Do I have to wear something formal? She asked. Just nice. I said, please, it is important to me. My mother had smiled that vague, terrifying smile of hers, the one that didn't reach her eyes. Of course, Vivian, we wouldn't miss it. I clung to that promise. I built a scaffolding of hope around it. I bought a new dress, a pale blue sheath that cost $120, the most I had spent on a garment in years. I ironed my gown. I ordered the cap and gown early to ensure the sizing was correct. I allowed myself to imagine the moment. My name called out over the speaker, the polite applause of strangers, and the distinct, anchoring cheer of the 3 people who shared my blood. The morning of the ceremony was gray and humid. I woke up at 6, my stomach fluttering with a mixture of nausea and thrill. I drank my coffee standing up in my kitchen, checking my phone every 5 minutes. At 7, I called my mother. I wanted to make sure they knew where to park. The university stadium was massive, and the traffic patterns were confusing. Hello? Her voice was thick with sleep. Mom, it is Vivian. I just wanted to remind you to take the south exit. The north one is closed for construction. There was a long pause, the sound of rustling sheets. Oh, right. The south exit. Are you up? I asked. The ceremony starts at 10, but you need to be seated by 9:30. We are getting there, she said. Her tone was oddly casual, loose, as if we were discussing a trip to the grocery store rather than a milestone I had spent half a decade reaching. Don't worry so much. Vivian, you will give yourself an ulcer. I hung up, trying to suppress the sudden spike of anxiety in my chest. They were just not morning people. That was all. They would be there. They promised. I drove to the stadium alone. That was part of the arrangement. I had to arrive early for the procession lineup. I parked my car, draped the gown over my arm, and walked toward the gathering crowd of students. They were mostly younger than me, 22-year-olds with bright, unlined faces, surrounded by parents carrying bouquets of flowers and balloons. I felt a little old, a little out of place, but I held my head high. I had earned this. At 9 o'clock, I sent a text to the group chat I had with my parents and Jenna. I am in line. Section C. See you soon. Nothing came back. At 9:15, the procession began to move. We shuffled into the cavernous arena, a sea of black polyester and square caps. The noise was deafening, a roar of cheers, air horns, and shouting. I scanned the section where their tickets were assigned, row 14, seats 10 through 12, empty. I told myself it was traffic. The parking was a nightmare. They were probably stuck in the line of cars snake-wrapping around the stadium. They would slip in during the opening speeches. The dean of the college began to speak about the future, about resilience, about the changing landscape of the global economy. I heard none of it. I watched the tunnel entrance at the top of Section C. Every time the usher moved aside to let latecomers in, my heart hammered against my ribs. I saw a family of 5 squeeze in. I saw an elderly couple struggle down the stairs. I did not see my father's gray windbreaker. I did not see my mother's stiff, blonde bob. I did not see Jenna. At 9:45, my phone buzzed in my pocket, hidden under my gown. I fished it out, shielding the screen with my hand. A text from Jenna. Family emergency. So sorry. Go knock 'em dead. I stared at the screen. The words blurred. Family emergency. What kind of emergency? Was someone in the hospital? Was there a car accident? But the tone was wrong. Go knock 'em dead. You do not use an exclamation point if someone is bleeding or dying. You do not use breezy slang if tragedy has struck. I texted back, Is everyone okay? No response. The names began, a long, hypnotic rhythm of syllables. Adams, Baker, Carter, Davis. My last name starts with H. I had time. I sat there, my hands gripping the program so hard the edges turned to pulp. I looked at the 3 empty seats in row 14. They were conspicuous gaps in a row of packed bodies. A woman in the row behind had put her purse on one of them, if it was a real emergency. My father would have called. He was a man of logistics. If a pipe had burst, if a tire had blown, if someone had fallen, he would have called to explain the delay. Silence from the phone. Henderson, Vivian. The announcer's voice was booming, distorted by the massive speakers. It was my turn. I stood up. My legs felt like wood. I walked toward the ramp. The lights were blindingly bright, hot against my skin. I handed my name card to the reader. Vivian Henderson. I walked across the stage. I had practiced this walk in my hallway. Shoulders back, smile ready, reach with the right hand, take the diploma case with the left. I looked out into the black void beyond the lights. I looked at Section C. The purse was still on the seat. There was polite applause, the kind strangers give to strangers, a ripple of noise that meant nothing. No whistles, no one shouting my name. Just the generic friction of hands clapping because that is what hands do at a graduation. I smiled. I forced the muscles in my cheeks to contract. The photographer crouched at the end of the ramp, his lens a giant, unblinking eye, flash. I had the photo, proof I was there, proof I had done it. I walked down the ramp and back to my seat. I sat down. I did not cry. I had been trained well. Crying made people uncomfortable. Crying ruined the mood. Crying was a demand for attention, and I was the structural beam. I did not demand. I waited for the remaining 400 names. I watched other people's families scream and wave signs. I watched a father run down the aisle to snap a picture of his son. I watched a mother weeping into a tissue. When the ceremony ended, the recessional music played, some triumphant march that sounded like a mockery. I filed out with the others. The humidity hit me the moment we exited the arena. Heavy and suffocating, I walked past the groups of families hugging, the bouquets of roses being crushed between bodies. I walked straight to the public restroom near the south exit. It was crowded, but I found a stall at the end. I locked the door, hung my gown on the hook, and leaned over the toilet. I vomited. It wasn't a gentle sickness. It was a violent upheaval. My body rejecting the morning, the anticipation, the hope. My stomach cramped. Emptying itself of the coffee and the acid, I gasped for air, wiping my mouth with the back of my hand. I stood there for a long time, staring at the graffiti scratched into the metal door. Class of 19 rules. I wasn't sad. That was the terrifying part. I wasn't heartbroken. I was humiliated. I felt foolish. I felt like a child who had set up a tea party for stuffed animals and was surprised when they didn't drink the tea. I cleaned myself up at the sink, ignoring the pitying look of a girl fixing her makeup next to me. I washed my face with cold water. I put on my lipstick. I checked my phone again. Nothing. I walked to my car. I took off the cap and threw it in the passenger seat. I drove to the restaurant where I had made the reservation for 4. It was a nice place, a steakhouse with white tablecloths and dark wood paneling. I walked to the hostess stand. "Checking in for Henderson?" she asked. Smiling. "Party of 4? Party of 1, I said. Her smile faltered. "Oh, is the rest of the party coming later?" "No," I said. "Just me." She hesitated, looking at her reservation book as if trying to calculate the social physics of the situation. "Right this way." She led me to a small table near the kitchen. It wasn't the booth I had asked for, but I didn't argue. I sat down. The waiter came over, full of professional zest. "Celebrating something today?" he asked, nodding at the diploma case I had placed on the table. "Graduation." I said. "Congratulations. Where's the lucky family?" "They couldn't make it." I said. The waiter paused. His eyes softened, and I hated him for it. I hated the pity. It felt like a slimy film on my skin. "I am sorry," he said. "Can I get you a drink?" "Iced tea," I said, "and the filet, medium rare." I ate in silence. The steak was perfect. The potatoes were buttery. I tasted none of it. I chewed and swallowed mechanically, fueling the machine. When the dessert menu came, I ordered the chocolate lava cake. "Does that come with writing on the plate?" I asked. "We can do that." The waiter said. "What would you like it to say?" "Congratulations, Vivian?" "No," I said. My voice sounded thin, brittle. "Just write, 'You did it.'" He looked at me, confused. "Just, 'You did it?'" "Yes." "Please." When the cake arrived, the words were scrawled in raspberry sauce on the rim of the white plate. "You did it." I stared at the words. I couldn't bear to see my name. Seeing Vivian written there would have made it real. It would have emphasized the lack of other names around me. You did it. It was a statement of fact, a lonely, singular fact. I ate the cake. I paid the bill. I tipped 20%. I drove to my apartment, changed into sweatpants, and sat on my couch. The silence in the room was absolute. It was 7 o'clock in the evening. I picked up my phone and dialed my father. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Hello? Dad?" I said. "Hey, Viv? You home?" "Yes, I am home." "Look, sorry about today," he said. His voice was blustery, the tone he used when he was trying to bulldoze over a mistake. "It just got crazy. Jenna had a thing, and then your mom got a migraine. And we just lost track of time." "You lost track of time?" I repeated. "For my graduation?" "Vivian, don't start," he said, the warning edge creeping in. "We felt bad enough. Don't make us feel worse. You know how your mother gets with her headaches. And Jenna was dealing with, well, personal stuff." "What personal stuff?" "Just stuff." "Vivian, God, you are too sensitive. We didn't do it on purpose. It is just a ceremony. You got the degree, right? That is what matters." I closed my eyes. Too sensitive. The classic Henderson refrain. If I bled when they cut me, I was accused of staining the carpet. I wanted you there. I said, We know. We assumed you wouldn't care that much. You have always been the independent one. You don't need us holding your hand. I hung up. I didn't slam the phone down. I just pressed the red button. I called my mother next. She didn't answer. I called Jenna. It went to voicemail. Hey, it is Jenna. Leave it. Jenna. I said to the recording. I was the only person in Section C without a family. I hope the emergency was worth it. I sat there for an hour, waiting for them to call back, waiting for the apology, waiting for someone to say, "We messed up. We are monsters. We are coming over right now with flowers, and we will beg for your forgiveness." The phone stayed dark. I went to sleep. Or rather, I lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling until the sun came up. The next morning, Sunday. I made coffee. I sat at my small kitchen table and opened social media. It was a reflex, a habit I hadn't yet broken. The first post on my feed was from Jenna. It was a photo posted yesterday at 11 in the morning. The timestamp burned into my retinas, 11 in the morning, while I was sitting in the stadium listening to the names starting with L. The photo was bright, saturated with filters. It showed my mother, my father, and Jenna sitting at a brunch table on a patio. Sunlight dappled the tablecloth. There were mimosas and flutes. A tiered stand of pastries sat in the center. My mother was laughing, her head thrown back, looking radiant and headache-free. My father was smiling at the camera, looking relaxed. Jenna was making a duck face, holding up a glass of orange juice. The caption read, "Sunday vibes on a Saturday. Celebrating our girl. Love this fam. Celebrating our girl." But I wasn't there. They weren't celebrating me. They were celebrating Jenna. Or they were celebrating themselves. Or they were simply celebrating the fact that they were together. And I was not. I zoomed in on the photo. In the background, I could see a clock on a bank building across the street. It read 11:05. They hadn't forgotten. You don't accidentally order a tower of pastries and sit for a 2-hour brunch while your daughter is graduating 10 miles away. You don't accidentally ignore texts. You don't accidentally draft a lie about a migraine and a family emergency. This was architecture. This was design. They had discussed it. They had decided, collectively, that my milestone was an inconvenience, or worse, a threat to the established order where Jenna was the star and I was the stagehand. To attend my graduation would be to acknowledge I had achieved something Jenna had not. To sit in the audience would be to put me in the spotlight. So they simply didn't, and then they posted it. That was the dagger. They posted it because they didn't fear my reaction. They assumed I would do what I always did, swallow it. They assumed I would look at the photo, feel the sting, and then convince myself that celebrating our girl was a cryptic reference to me. Even though I was absent, they assumed I would smooth it over to keep them comfortable. I put the phone down on the table. I stood up. My hands were trembling, but my mind was icy clear. It was a strange sensation, like a fever breaking. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the mug against the wall. I didn't type out a furious comment on the photo. I walked to my bedroom closet. On the top shelf, pushed back behind my winter sweaters, was a wooden keepsake box. It was an old cigar box I had glued seashells to when I was 7. It held the meager documentation of my life, my social security card, my passport, a few savings bonds my grandmother had given me before she died, and my birth certificate. I took the box down and carried it to the bed. I opened the lid. The smell of old cedar and dust rose up. I sifted through the papers. Passport, check. Social security card, check. Savings bonds, check. I frowned. I dug deeper. Moving aside a dried corsage from prom and a ribbon from a spelling bee, the birth certificate was gone. I froze. I knew it was there. I had seen it 6 months ago when I needed it to renew my driver's license. I was meticulous about my paperwork. I never lost documents. I emptied the box onto the bedspread. I shook it upside down. Nothing. I sat back, my heart thumping a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. Who had access to my apartment? My landlord and my mother. My mother had a spare key. I had given it to her 3 years ago when I went on a business trip, just in case of an emergency. She rarely used it, or so I thought. Why would she take my birth certificate? It didn't make sense. It was a piece of paper. Unless. I grabbed my phone and dialed the county records office. It was Sunday, so I got an automated system. I navigated through the menus until I reached the option for vital record status. I entered my case number from a previous request I had made years ago. I kept all the reference numbers in a spreadsheet on my laptop. The automated voice was robotic and cheerful. A request for certified copies was processed on April 14th. Status: delivered, April 14th. 3 weeks ago. I hadn't requested copies 3 weeks ago. Someone had used my information to order official copies of my birth certificate. And someone had physically removed the original from my apartment. This wasn't just pettiness. This wasn't just a family skipping a boring ceremony to drink mimosas. This was administrative. This was preparation. My stomach dropped. A sensation like an elevator cable snapping. You don't steal someone's identity documents unless you plan to do something with them, or unless you want to prevent them from doing something. It suggested planning. It suggested that while I was studying for finals and planning a dinner they never intended to eat, they were busy arranging something. I looked at the empty wooden box. I looked at the phone where the photo of my smiling, treacherous family still glowed on the screen. They thought I was safe. They thought I was the beam that would never move, never break, never shift. They thought they could erase my achievement, steal my papers, and gaslight me into apologizing for being hurt, and I would still show up for Christmas dinner with gifts for everyone. They were wrong. I didn't pack a bag yet. I didn't make a scene. I simply stood up and walked to the front door. I engaged the deadbolt. I wasn't going to call them and demand the certificate back. They would deny it. They would say I lost it. They would say I was crazy. I was done asking to be seen. I was done begging to be remembered. If they wanted to forget me, I would help them. I would do it so thoroughly, so completely, that the space where I used to be would haunt them. I walked back to the kitchen, picked up my phone, and turned it off. Not just the screen. I powered it down completely. The silence in the apartment changed. It wasn't lonely anymore. It was heavy with potential. I was Vivian Henderson, the dependable one, the easy one, and I was about to become the ghost. Disappearing is not a magic trick. It is an administrative burden. It is a series of phone calls, forms, fees, and the quiet, systematic dismantling of a person's digital footprint. In movies, the protagonist packs a bag and drives into the sunset. In reality, I spent 3 weeks sitting on the floor of my apartment, shredding bank statements until the machine overheated and smelled like burning plastic. I moved with the efficiency of a fugitive, though I had committed no crime. I broke my lease, paying the penalty of 2 months of rent without flinching. I closed the joint checking account my mother had insisted we keep open since high school, for emergencies, transferring my share of the funds to a new bank that had no branches in my home state. I changed my phone number, not once, but twice, just to be sure the trail was cold. I chose Briarhaven not because I loved the ocean, but because it was a blank spot on the map of my family's consciousness. My father hated the humidity of the coast. My mother preferred the dry, manicured heat of Arizona resorts. Jenna only traveled to places that were trending on social media. Briarhaven was a working-class port city in the Pacific Northwest, gray and damp, full of steep hills and houses that smelled of salt and cedar. It was unglamorous. It was perfect. The drive took 3 days. I stayed in motels where the doors opened directly to the parking lot, paying cash, eating sandwiches from gas stations. When I finally crossed the city limits, watching the fog roll off the bay and swallow the bridge, I didn't feel a surge of freedom. I felt a heavy, dull numbness. I was a phantom. I was a woman with no people. The name change happened 2 months after I arrived. I stood in the hallway of the county courthouse, a brutalist concrete building that looked more like a prison than a place of justice. I was wearing a gray blazer I had bought at a thrift store. I wanted to look invisible. When the clerk called my name, she didn't look up. Vivian Henderson? I stood up. It was the last time I would answer to those syllables. The hearing was short. The judge was a tired man with reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. He asked if I was changing my name to evade debt or criminal liability. No, Your Honor. I said, "Why do you want to change it?" He asked. It was a standard question, but my throat tightened. "I want a fresh start." I said. He stamped the paper. Granted. Walking out of the courthouse, holding the certified order in a manila envelope, I felt a strange cocktail of emotions. It was empowering. Yes, I had chosen myself, but there was a grief there, too. Heavy and wet, like the fog outside. Vivian Henderson was the girl who tried so hard. She was the girl who baked the cakes and remembered the birthdays and waited in the empty section of the stadium. Killing her felt like a mercy killing, but it was a killing nonetheless. I walked to a coffee shop down the street and ordered a latte. When the barista asked for a name, I hesitated for only a fraction of a second. "Elena," I said. Elena Hart. It sounded sturdy. It sounded like a woman who didn't apologize for taking up space. I found a job quickly. My resume was impressive. Years of managing high-stress medical administration made me a desirable candidate. I was hired by a medical software company on the outskirts of the city. The office was quiet, modern, and filled with the hum of servers and the click of keyboards. I became Elena Hart, the implementation specialist. I was polite. I was efficient. I brought my own lunch and ate it in the break room while reading paperback novels. I did not participate in office gossip. I did not add colleagues on social media. When people asked about my family, I gave them a practiced, smooth surface to slide off of. "They are back east," I would say. "We are not very close." People accepted that. In Briarhaven, lots of people had drifted west to get away from something. It was a city of transplants. I rented a small apartment on the second floor of a converted Victorian house. It had drafty windows and a radiator that clanked in the night. But it was mine. I painted the walls a soft sage green. I bought furniture that didn't match the set I had left behind. I bought a rug that was impractical and fluffy. My neighbor across the hall was a woman named Marisol Vega. She was 50 years old, a landscape architect with hands that were always a little rough from soil and a laugh that could crack a window. We met when I was struggling to carry a bookshelf up the narrow stairs. "Honey, put that down before you slip a disc," she had called out from her doorway. She didn't ask if I needed help. She just walked over, grabbed the bottom of the box, and lifted. We maneuvered it into my living room in silence. When we set it down, I instinctively reached for my wallet. "Thank you so much. Can I give you $20? Or I can bake you something? I make really good cookies." Marisol looked at me, her dark eyes crinkling at the corners. She put her hands on her hips. "Elena," she said, "I helped you because the box was heavy and you looked like you were going to fall. You don't owe me a cookie tax." I stood there, my hand hovering over my purse. The transaction had failed. In my family, every favor had a ledger. Every nice gesture was a deposit that would be withdrawn later with interest. "Oh," I said, I don't want to be a bother." "You are not a bother," she said. "You are a neighbor. Come over for tea later if you want. If not, that is fine too." I didn't go that first day. I was too suspicious. I waited for the catch. I waited for her to ask me to watch her cat, or lend her money, or listen to a 3-hour monologue about her ex-husband. But the request never came. Over the next few months, Marisol became a constant, gentle presence. She would leave surplus tomatoes from her garden by my door in a basket. No note demanding thanks, just tomatoes. She would wave when we passed in the hall. One rainy Tuesday, I had a flat tire in the driveway. I was standing in the downpour, staring at it, when Marisol pulled up. She rolled down her window. "Jump in," she said. "I will drop you at work." I hesitated. "It is 20 minutes out of your way. So, I have a podcast I want to finish." "Get in." "Elena, you are getting soaked." I got in. The car smelled like lavender and wet dog. She drove me to the office, dropped me at the front door, and waved as she drove off. I stood on the sidewalk, watching her taillights fade. My chest hurt. It was a physical ache, a sharp pang behind my sternum. It was the pain of realizing how starved I was. I had spent my life eating crumbs and calling it a feast. and now someone had just handed me a loaf of bread and asked for nothing in return. I realized then how strange it felt to be cared for without a price tag. It made me want to cry. A year passed. I had built a routine. I had a favorite grocery store. I had a favorite trail where I ran on Saturday mornings. I had Marisol. I had Elena Hart. Vivian Henderson was a ghost locked in a box in the back of my mind. Then the email came. It was a Wednesday night. I was sitting on my sofa, laptop open, browsing for a new rain jacket. My phone buzzed with a notification from the old email address, the one I kept active only because it was tied to my student loans and a few tax documents. I rarely checked it. The subject line was, "Family Meeting." The sender was my father. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the trackpad. I shouldn't open it. I should delete it unread. I opened it. Vivian, it has been a year. We have given you space, even though your dramatic exit was completely uncalled for and, frankly, very hurtful to your mother. We are willing to put this behind us. We are a family, and families forgive, even when one person abandons them. We need to settle some matters regarding the house and your grandmother's estate. Stop acting like a child and come talk like an adult. Let us know when you can call. Dad. I read it twice. Your dramatic exit. Abandonment. Stop acting like a child. There was no question mark. No, how are you? No, we miss you. Just a demand and a rewriting of history. I was the aggressor. They were the victims. I was the one who had broken the contract. I closed the laptop. My hands started to shake. It wasn't a tremble. It was a violent vibration that started in my fingertips and traveled up my arms. My teeth chattered. I sat there for an hour, shaking. I was 35 years old. I was a professional woman with a 401k and a lease in my own name. I was Elena Hart. And yet, one paragraph of text from my father turned me back into Vivian, the scared little girl who just wanted to stop the yelling. My body remembered the rules even if my mind had rejected them. My body thought obedience equaled safety. My body thought that if I didn't call them back, the roof would cave in. I stood up, walked to the bathroom, and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked at the lines around my eyes, the set of my jaw. No, I whispered. I went back to the laptop. I didn't reply. I didn't drag the email to the trash folder where I could retrieve it later. I permanently deleted it. Then I blocked the sender. The next week, I made an appointment with a therapist. Her name was Dr. Aris. She had a calm office with a view of the bay and chairs that didn't feel clinical. I don't want to fix my family. I told her in the first session, I know they are broken. I want to know why I stayed so long. I want to know why I still feel like I owe them my life. We spent months peeling back the layers. It was ugly work. It was like debriding a wound that had healed over an infection. I realized that my role in the family wasn't just to be the helper. It was to be the loser. I was the designated failure, or at least, the designated mediocrity. My success threatened them because if I was strong, capable, and independent, then who were they? If I wasn't the needy, sensitive one, then my father wasn't the protector. If I wasn't the chaotic one, which was how they painted me, then my mother wasn't the saint for putting up with me. They rewarded me only when I was small. When I was sick, they brought soup. When I was broke, they loaned money with a lecture. But when I graduated, when I succeeded, silence, sabotage. It was during this time that I found the lie. I had created a burner social media account, a profile with a fake name and a stock photo of a landscape, to keep an eye on things. It was my one vice, my one weakness. I wanted to know what story they were telling. I found a post on Jenna's profile from 6 months ago. It was a throwback Thursday post, a picture of her and my mother, looking somber. The caption read, "Missing my sister today. It is so hard watching someone you love struggle with mental health. We tried everything to help her, but sometimes people just run away because they aren't ready to face reality. Praying she finds peace. Hashtag mental health awareness. Hashtag family first." I stared at the screen, the bile rising in my throat. unstable, mental health struggles, ran away. She had taken my silence and filled it with a pathology. She had explained my absence not as a reaction to their cruelty, but as a symptom of my own brokenness. It was brilliant. In a sick way, it immunized them against any questions. Why wasn't Vivian at Christmas? Oh, she is having an episode. Why haven't we seen Vivian? She is off the grid. Poor thing. If I ever came back and tried to tell the truth, that they forgot my graduation, that they stole my birth certificate, it would sound like the paranoid ramblings of the unstable sister. I closed the browser. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. I wasn't just estranged. I was being fictionalized. I threw myself into work. Work was safe. Data was binary. Code either worked or it didn't. There was no gaslighting in software. I was promoted 6 months later to a senior analyst role. I had a team. I had a new office. I felt, for the first time, like the ground under my feet was solid rock, not shifting sand. Then the alert came. It was a Tuesday morning in October. The rain was lashing against the windows of the office building. I was reviewing a compliance report when an automated email landed in my inbox from the HR department's verification system. We used a third-party service for background checks, but because I was in admin, I sometimes saw the logs for internal audits. This email, however, was different. It was a flag from a credit monitoring service I had signed up for years ago and forgotten about. Alert: an employment verification request was attempted on your file. I frowned. I hadn't applied for any loans. I hadn't applied for a new apartment. I logged into the portal. The request hadn't come from a bank. It had come from a private investigation firm based in Chicago, and the subject of the search wasn't Elena Hart. It was Vivian Henderson. They were looking for my degree. They were verifying my graduation date. My blood ran cold. Why would a private investigator be checking Vivian Henderson's degree? My family knew I had graduated. They knew where I went to school. They didn't need to verify it, unless they were trying to find where I was working now. If they could link Vivian Henderson's degree to a new employment record, or if they were trying to build a case for something, they could track me. The panic flared. Hot and bright. They were coming. They hadn't let go. I reached for the phone to call my father. The impulse was so strong it was almost muscular. "Dad, why are you doing this? Leave me alone." But I stopped. My hand hovered over the receiver. "Doctor." Aris's voice was in my head. "When you react to them, you validate their power. You are not a child asking for permission to leave. You are an adult protecting your perimeter." I put the phone down. I didn't call my family. Instead, I looked up the number for the university registrar's office. I dialed, Records Department. A woman answered. "Hello?" I said. My voice was steady, colder than I felt. "My name is Vivian Henderson. I am a graduate of the class of 2019. I need to place a privacy restriction on my directory information immediately, under FERPA regulations." There was a pause. "Okay, Ms. Henderson, we can do that. It means we won't verify your degree or attendance to anyone who asks. Employers, banks, family members, no one. That is exactly what I want." I said, "I want a total block. If anyone calls, I want you to say you have no information available for the public." "I can do that." She said, "I just need to verify your identity." I went through the security questions: social security number, date of birth, mother's maiden name. When it was done, she typed for a moment. "Done. You are dark. Ms. Henderson. Thank you." I said. I hung up. I sat in my ergonomic chair in my quiet office, listening to the rain. I felt a new sensation. It wasn't fear. It wasn't the shaking I had felt after the email. It was anger, sharp, clean, adult anger. They weren't just hurt that I had left. They weren't just worried about their unstable daughter. You don't hire a private investigator to find a daughter you miss. You hire a private investigator to find a fugitive. You check credentials because you are building a file. They were still trying to own the narrative. They needed Vivian Henderson to exist, but only on their terms. They needed to know where I was, what I was doing. and how much control they could exert. I realized then that my absence wasn't just an annoyance to them, it was a threat. Without me to play the role of the mess, the failure, the needy one, their dynamic was destabilizing. Without the scapegoat, they had to look at each other. Without the lightning rod, the storm had nowhere to ground itself. They were escalating, and if they were escalating, it meant they needed something from me. I turned back to my computer. I typed in my password, a complex string of characters that had nothing to do with birthdays or anniversaries. I was Elena Hart. I lived in Briarhaven. I had a friend named Marisol who gave me tomatoes. But Vivian Henderson was still in the room. And for the first time, she wasn't hiding in the corner. She was standing at the door, locking the deadbolt, waiting to see who would try to kick it down. I opened a new document on my computer. I named it Timeline. I started typing. May 18th, 2019. Graduation. May 19th, 2019. The Instagram post. May 20th, 2019. Discovery of missing birth certificate. June 2020. The email. October 2020. The background check. I looked at the list. It wasn't a family history anymore. It was evidence. I didn't know what they were planning, or why they were searching for me now, after a year of silence. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to make it easy for them. I saved the file, I encrypted it, then I went to the break room, made a cup of tea, and went back to work. I had a deadline to meet, and unlike my family, I kept my promises. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, carried in by the relentless Pacific wind that rattled the sash windows of my Briarhaven apartment. It was a certified envelope, thick and heavy, the kind that demands a signature. It had been forwarded 3 times. I could trace its journey by the yellow stickers plastered across the front. Each one a correction, a redirection, hopping from my old apartment to the mail forwarding service I had briefly used, and finally, miraculously, to the P.O. box I still maintained for the last threads of my old life. I sat at my kitchen table, the envelope looking like a bomb among the utility bills and grocery circulars. The return address was a law firm in the city I used to call home, Bates, Garris Associates. I didn't know the name. I slit the top with a kitchen knife. The paper inside was high-quality bond, cream-colored and stiff. It was a notice of beneficiary status regarding the Henderson Family Educational Trust. I read the title 3 times. Henderson Family Educational Trust. There was no such thing. My family didn't have trusts. We had checking accounts that hovered near zero and credit cards that were maxed out every Christmas. My father was a mid-level manager who complained about taxes. My mother was a housewife who spent money on throw pillows and skincare. We were not trust fund people. And yet, there was my name, Vivian Henderson. Listed as a primary beneficiary, the letter was dated 2 weeks ago. It stated that due to the retirement of a senior partner, the file was being transferred, and an audit of the disbursements required my signature to verify receipt of funds for the fiscal year ending in 2024. Receipt of funds. I hadn't received a dime, not a birthday check, not a Christmas card, and certainly not a disbursement from a trust I didn't know existed. I stared at the paper until the words blurred. A cold, prickly sensation crawled up the back of my neck. It was the feeling of being watched, of a door opening in a room you thought was empty. I reached for my phone, then stopped. I was Elena Hart now. Elena Hart didn't have a trust fund. Elena Hart didn't have a family who hid money, but the letter was addressed to Vivian. And if I ignored it, whatever machine this was part of would keep churning. I looked up the number for Bates, Garris Associates. The website redirected me to a new landing page. Kessler Wainwright, LLP. The acquisition had happened 6 months ago. That explained the audit. New owners were shaking out the rugs, looking for loose change and lost files. I dialed the number. My hand was sweating against the plastic case of the phone. Kessler and Wainwright. How may I direct your call? A receptionist with a voice like polished glass. I cleared my throat. I am calling regarding a letter I received. File number. I glanced at the paperwork. H7742. Regarding the Henderson Family Educational Trust. One moment, please. The hold music was classical, calm and orderly. It was a stark contrast to the chaotic noise in my head. A man came on the line. His voice was brisk, impatient. "This is Arthur Kessler. To whom am I speaking?" "This is Vivian Henderson." The name felt heavy on my tongue, like a stone I had swallowed years ago. "Ms. Henderson," he said, the impatience smoothing into professional caution. "We have been trying to reach you. The contact information on file was defunct. We had to use a tracer to find a forwarding address." A tracer. The word made me flinch. I moved. I said, "Why are you looking for me?" "Mr. Kessler sighed, the sound of papers rustling in the background. "As the letter states, we are conducting a compliance audit of all active trusts managed by the previous firm. There are some irregularities in the disbursement acknowledgments for the Henderson Trust that we need to clarify. Specifically, we are missing countersignatures for the last 3 quarters of educational grants." "Educational grants?" I asked. "Yes, the funds disbursed for your continuing education and nonprofit work." I gripped the edge of the table. The wood dug into my palm. "Mr. Kessler," I said, keeping my voice low and steady, "I haven't been in school since 2019, and I don't run a nonprofit." The line went silent, the kind of silence that is heavy and expensive. "I am looking at a ledger that says otherwise." "Ms. Henderson," he said, his tone shifting from bureaucratic to suspicious. "Perhaps we should switch to a video call. I need to verify your identity before we discuss this further." A video call. If I did it, I was stepping back into the light. I was admitting that Vivian Henderson was alive, reachable, and listening. I was giving them a face, but if I didn't, if I hung up now, the irregularities would be buried. Someone would forge a signature. The machine would keep eating. "I will do it." I said, "Send me the link." 10 minutes later, I was sitting in front of my laptop. I had tied my hair back, put on a plain black shirt, and positioned the camera so the wall behind me was blank. No details of my apartment, no clues to Briarhaven. Mr. Kessler appeared on the screen. He was a sharp-featured man in his 50s, wearing a suit that cost more than my car. He looked at me, then down at a file on his desk, then back at me. "Can you hold up a form of government ID, please?" I held up my passport, the one I had kept, the one with Vivian Henderson's face and name. He squinted at the screen, comparing the photo to the woman sitting before him. "Thank you," he said. He leaned back. "Ms. Henderson, this trust was established in 2015 by a Mrs. Eleanor Henderson, your grandmother, I believe?" "Grandma Eleanor." My chest constricted. She had died 5 years ago. She was the only person in my family who had ever looked at me with anything other than mild disappointment. She had been a quiet woman, frugal and sharp, who lived in a small bungalow and drank instant coffee. "She left me a trust?" I asked. "She left the bulk of her estate to the trust." "Yes," Kessler said, "designated for the educational advancement of her grandchildren, you and your sister, Jenna Alden." I blinked. Grandma Eleanor didn't have a bulk of an estate. She had a collection of porcelain cats and a paid-off Buick. "How much is in the trust?" I asked. "The current principal is just under $400,000. He said. The number hit me like a physical blow. $400,000. My grandmother had that kind of money? And she hid it? No, she hadn't hidden it. She had saved it, every penny. She had lived like a pauper so she could leave something behind, and no one told me. "Mr. Kessler," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I was never notified of this trust. I never received a copy of the will. I have never requested a disbursement." He frowned deeply. "That is concerning, because according to these files, you have been receiving monthly stipends for the last 4 years, roughly $3,000 a month, wired to an account under the name." He squinted at a document. "Henderson Admin Services." I laughed. It was a dry, sharp sound that didn't feel like humor. "Henderson Admin Services. That isn't me," I said. "Mr." Kessler looked at me for a long moment. He was a lawyer. He knew the smell of fraud. It smelled like burning rubber. "I am going to share my screen with you." Ms. Henderson, he said, I want you to look at these documents. A window popped up on my monitor. It was a PDF of a disbursement request form. It was dated June 14th of last year. The reason for request was typed in a generic font. Tuition assistance for advanced certification in medical ethics. At the bottom of the page was a signature, Vivian Henderson. It was a good forgery. It had the loop of the V that I used to use. It had the sharp slant of the H, but it was too clean. It lacked the hesitation marks of a real hand, but the date was what made me freeze. June 14th. On June 14th of last year. I was in a mandatory all-day implementation workshop for my software company in Seattle. I had signed in at 8 in the morning and signed out at 5. I had witnesses. I had a digital badge log. Scroll down, I said. He scrolled. There was another document, a receipt for textbooks and materials, $2,000, and another, a travel reimbursement for a leadership conference in Miami. I haven't left the state of Washington in 2 years. I whispered, Mr. Kessler was silent. He was clicking through pages now, his face growing tighter. Stop. I said, go back to that last one. He paused. Which one? The scanned invoice. The one from January. He clicked back. It was a scanned image of a receipt, taped onto a piece of plain white paper to be photocopied. Standard office procedure for small receipts, but in the corner of the scan, caught by the high-resolution setting of the machine, was the edge of a yellow sticky note. It must have been stuck to the receipt when it was fed into the scanner. A careless mistake by whoever was preparing the file. The note was cut off, but the handwriting was legible in thick blue ink. Scan for Mom. Make sure V's name is big. I stopped breathing. I knew that S. I knew the way the loop curled backward, almost touching the bottom of the letter. I knew the aggressive dot over the I that looked like a stab wound. It was Jenna's handwriting. Make sure V's name is big. They weren't just stealing the money. They were creating a paper trail. They were manufacturing a Vivian Henderson who was perpetually in school, perpetually needing support, perpetually taking from the pot. Mr. Kessler, I said, that handwriting on the note. That is my sister. Mr. Kessler cleared his throat. He stopped sharing the screen. His face returned, grave and pale. Ms. Henderson, he said formally, if what you are saying is true, we have a significant problem. This trust is being administered by your parents as trustees. If they are fabricating beneficiary requests, they are stealing it. I said, they are stealing my grandmother's money and using my name to wash it. He adjusted his glasses. I cannot advise you legally, as I represent the trust, not you individually. However, I have a fiduciary duty to the assets. I am going to freeze all disbursements immediately pending an internal review. Thank you. I said, Ms. Henderson, he added, his voice dropping an octave. If this is fraud, it is likely not limited to this office. You need to protect yourself. Do you have counsel? I didn't answer. I just ended the call. I sat in the silence of my apartment. The wind was still rattling the windows, but I didn't hear it. I heard the blood rushing in my ears. My grandmother had left me a lifeline. She had left me enough money to buy a house, to go to medical school, to breathe. And my family had looked at that money, looked at me, and decided I didn't deserve to know it existed. But they didn't just steal it. They used it to keep Vivian alive. Make sure V's name is big. Why? Why did they need my name on the receipts? If they just wanted the money, they could have forged a check to themselves. Why create a fictional education? I needed help. I needed someone who understood numbers better than I did. I spent the night researching. I didn't look for a shark lawyer. I didn't look for a litigator who would scream in court. I looked for a forensic accountant, someone who could look at a pile of numbers and see the story they were telling. I found Dahlia Rourke. Her website was sparse, no photos of gavels or scales of justice, just her name and a tagline, Financial Intelligence Fraud Investigation. I emailed her at 3 in the morning. I kept it brief. Identity theft involving family trust, possible charity fraud, need audit. She called me at 8 a.m. Her voice was low, raspy. like she had just woken up or smoked a pack of cigarettes. "Ms. Hart?" she asked. I used my new name. "Yes, I read your email," she said. "I charge $300 an hour. I require a retainer of $2,000, and I don't hold hands. If you want therapy, call a shrink. If you want to know where the money went, hire me. I like you already." I said. I met her 2 days later in a coffee shop in downtown Briarhaven. Dahlia was a small woman with sharp, bird-like features and gray hair cut into a severe bob. She wore a trench coat and drank black coffee. She didn't look at me with pity when I told her the story. She looked at me with clinical fascination. She took notes in a small leather notebook, her pen moving in quick, jagged strokes. "So," she said, tapping the pen against the table, "let me get this straight. You disappear, you change your name, you go dark, and instead of forgetting you, your family builds a financial construct around your ghost." "Yes," I said. "It's sloppy," she said. "That sticky note?" "Amateur hour. Professional fraudsters don't leave notes for Mom on the evidence. They aren't professionals." I said. "They are arrogant. They think I am gone. They think no one is watching." Dahlia nodded. "Arrogance is good. Arrogance leaves breadcrumbs." She opened her laptop. "I want you to give me everything you have. The trust documents Kessler sent you, the names of your parents, your sister's business entities, everything." I handed over the flash drive I had prepared. She plugged it in and started typing. Her fingers flew across the keys. "You know," she said without looking up, "trust fraud is usually quiet. People steal the money and buy a boat. They don't usually create a fake life for the victim. Unless what? Unless the fake life is worth more than the money," she said. She hit the enter key with a flourish. "Here," she said, turning the screen toward me. It was a search result. "The Henderson Promise Initiative." I stared at the words. "It sounds like a charity." I said. "It is," Dahlia said. "A 501c3 nonprofit, registered 3 years ago. Mission statement: empowering young women to overcome family trauma and achieve academic excellence." She clicked the link. The website loaded. It was sleek, professional. High-resolution stock photos of diverse students studying in libraries. A Donate Now button in the corner in bright orange. But the centerpiece of the homepage was a photo. It was me. It was an old photo, taken when I was 22, at a cousin's wedding. I was looking off to the side, laughing at something someone had said. It was one of the few photos where I looked genuinely happy, unburdened. They had cropped everyone else out. The background was blurred. Under the photo, in bold serif font, were the words, "Our Founder's Story." I felt the blood drain from my face. I reached out and touched the screen, as if I could scratch the image away. "Click it," Dahlia said softly. I clicked. The text was a masterpiece of fiction. Vivian Henderson was a brilliant young woman who struggled against the weight of severe emotional challenges, despite the unconditional love and support of her family. Vivian fought a daily battle with her own mind. She dreamed of helping others, but her own path was cut short by her need for isolation. Though she has chosen to live a private life away from the pressures of the world, her spirit lives on in the Henderson Promise, led by her mother, Joyce Henderson, and her sister, Jenna Alden. This initiative fulfills Vivian's dream. We provide scholarships to students like Vivian, those who have the potential but lack the stability. I read it again. Her own path was cut short. Her need for isolation, her spirit lives on. They talked about me like I was dead, or worse, like I was invalid. They had taken my escape, my survival, and repackaged it as a tragedy. They had turned my boundary into a symptom, and then they asked for money. "Look at the sidebar," Dahlia said. I looked. Platinum donors, gold sponsors. There were logos of local businesses. There were names of church groups. "They are raising money on your corpse," Dahlia said. "While you are still walking around." I felt sick. A deep, churning nausea that had nothing to do with food. "They forgot my graduation." I whispered. "What?" Dahlia asked. "They forgot my graduation. I thought they just didn't care." But it wasn't that. I looked at the photo of my 22-year-old self. It was a test, I said, my voice rising. They wanted to see what I would do. They wanted to see if I would fight back. When I didn't, when I just disappeared, they took it as permission. They realized they didn't need me. They just needed the idea of me. I was better to them as a tragic figure than I ever was as a person. Alive. I was annoying. I had needs. I had a voice. But missing Vivian? Troubled Vivian? She was a gold mine. She was a tax write-off. She was a fundraising hook. Dahlia sat back, crossing her arms. This is big. Elena, or Vivian, whoever you want to be right now. This isn't just stealing from a dead grandmother. This is wire fraud. This is charity fraud. This is theft by deception on a massive scale. If they are soliciting donations based on a lie, she let the sentence hang. What do I do? I asked. Dahlia looked at me. That depends. Do you want the money back? Or do you want to burn it down? I looked at the website. I looked at the donate button. I looked at the lie that had been polished and sold to the world. I don't want the money. I said, I want my name back. Dahlia nodded. Then we don't sue them yet. If you sue them now, they will settle. They will offer you a payout to sign a non-disclosure agreement. They will scrub the website, rename the charity, and keep the money they already stole. So what do? We let them keep lying, she said. We let them keep digging. We document every dollar. We find out where the money is actually going, because I guarantee you, it isn't going to scholarships. She leaned forward, her eyes hard and bright. You said your sister is involved? Yes. Then we look at her companies. We look at your mother's accounts. We trace the flow. But you have to stay dead. Vivian, at least for a little while longer. You can't let them know you know. But Kessler knows. I said, the lawyer? He froze the trust. Dahlia said, he didn't tell them why. He just said audit. They will be panicking right now. They will be trying to cover their tracks. That is when they make mistakes. That is when we catch them. She closed her laptop. Go home. She said, don't call them. Don't email them. Let them sweat. I walked out of the coffee shop into the gray afternoon. The rain had started again, a cold drizzle that soaked through my coat. I walked to the pier. I stood at the railing, looking out at the dark water of the Sound. I thought about the graduation. I thought about the empty seats. I finally understood it. It hadn't been an accident. It hadn't been a mistake. It was a rehearsal. They had practiced erasing me that day. They had practiced the narrative. Vivian is difficult. Vivian didn't tell us the time. Vivian is too sensitive. They had tested the waters to see if the world would believe them over me. And when the world, our relatives, their friends, clicked like on the brunch photo, the test was a success. They realized they could control the story of me better if I wasn't there to contradict it. I gripped the cold metal railing. I was done being the structural beam. I was done being the easy one. I reached into my pocket and touched the phone where the photo of the website was saved. I wasn't going to contact them. I wasn't going to scream. I was going to wait. I was going to watch. And when I had every receipt, every lie, every stolen dollar mapped out on Dahlia's spreadsheets, I wasn't just going to burn it down. I was going to turn the lights on. I turned away from the water and started the long walk back to my apartment. My steps were quiet on the wet pavement. I was a ghost, yes, but ghosts are terrifying for a reason. They remember everything. Data tells a story. If you know how to listen, in the weeks that followed my meeting with Dahlia Rourke, I learned to listen to the language of spreadsheets. Dahlia's office became my second home. A small, windowless room in a shared workspace building that smelled of stale coffee and ozone. We spent our evenings projecting financial filings onto the white wall, tracing the flow of money through the veins of the Henderson Promise Initiative. It was not a steady stream, it was a pulse. Look here, Dahlia said, pointing a laser pointer at a spike in donations from November of last year. $12,000 in 48 hours. What happened on November 10th? I checked the timeline I had built. I cross-referenced it with the Wayback Machine. an internet archive tool that let us see the nonprofit social media pages as they appeared on specific dates. November 10th. There it was. A post on Facebook and Instagram. A black and white photo of a girl looking out a rainy window. It wasn't me, but it looked enough like me to pass. The caption was written by my sister. Jenna. Thinking of my sister tonight. The holidays are always the hardest when there is an empty chair at the table. Mental illness doesn't just take a person, it takes a family. We are keeping the light on. Vivian, please donate to help us reach more lost souls. I felt a cold shiver crawl down my spine. They were monetizing my absence. We went back further. Every significant spike in revenue correlated with a post about my struggle, my disappearance, or my fragility. When the donations slowed down, Jenna or my mother would post a tearful update, a vague reference to a hard week or a setback in the search, and the money would pour in again. They are farming you, Dahlia said, her voice devoid of pity, just cold professional assessment. You are the crop. They harvest your tragedy every time they need cash flow. It wasn't just strangers donating. That was the part that made my stomach turn. We pulled the donor lists from the public tax filings. The major contributors were listed. I saw the names of my parents' neighbors. I saw my old high school teachers. I saw the parents of my friends. People who had known me, who had sat in my kitchen, were sending checks for $50, $100, $500, believing they were helping a family in crisis. Then I saw the board of directors list, Joyce Henderson, Jenna Alden, and below them, Pastor Grant Halloway. I stopped breathing for a moment. Pastor Halloway. He was the man who had baptized me. He was the man who had officiated my cousin's funeral. He was a pillar of the community, a man with a booming laugh and a reputation for unimpeachable integrity. He is on the board, I whispered. He lends credibility. Dahlia said, a scam looks like a scam until you put a clergyman on the letterhead. Then it looks like a ministry. Does he know? I asked. Does he know it is a lie? Dahlia shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe he is just another person they charmed. Maybe they told him the same sob story they told the internet, and he believed it because why would a mother lie about her own daughter? The betrayal tasted like copper in my mouth. Pastor Halloway had always been kind to me. He had once told me I had a quiet strength. Now, his name was being used to validate the idea that I was broken. I need to see the trust documents again. I said. Dahlia pulled them up. I zoomed in on the signature page of the disbursement form from 2 years ago. Vivian Henderson. I had looked at it before, but now I looked closer. I compared it to my actual signature on my old driver's license. The loops were too perfect. The pressure of the pen was uniform. When people sign their name, they hesitate. They speed up and slow down. There is a rhythm to it that is unique to the muscle memory of the hand. This signature had no rhythm. It was drawn. Someone had sat down with a copy of my signature and practiced. They had filled pages of notebook paper, tracing the curves, learning the slant, until they could do it without shaking. It wasn't a crime of opportunity. It was a craft. Jenna. I said, it has to be Jenna. My mother doesn't have the patience for this. She would have just scribbled something and hoped for the best. Jenna is a perfectionist. I could see her doing it. I could imagine her sitting at the kitchen table, a glass of wine in hand, copying my name over and over again, laughing at how easy it was to become me. I need to know what they are saying. I said, not just the posts. I need to hear them. I spent the next 3 nights scouring the internet. I went beyond the surface-level searches. I dug into the archives of the local community access channel. I looked for podcasts where Pastor Halloway might have been a guest. I found a live stream recording from a community wellness town hall, recorded 3 years ago. I put on my headphones and pressed play. The video was grainy. My mother was sitting on a panel, holding a microphone. She looked elegant, mournful. She was wearing a pearl necklace I recognized. It was the one I had bought her with my first paycheck from the admin job. It is hard. My mother was saying to the moderator, it is the hardest thing a mother can go through. You raise a child, you give them everything, and then you watch them crumble under the weight of the world. The moderator nodded sympathetically. And you say Vivian had trouble handling pressure? My mother sighed. Oh, yes. Even as a little girl, Vivian was fragile. If things got too loud or too demanding, she would shut down. We tried to protect her. We tried to create a safe bubble, but the world is a sharp place. When she left, it wasn't because we pushed her away. It was because she couldn't handle the expectations of a normal life. She needed to run. I paused the video. Fragile. Shut down. Could not handle expectations. It was a masterclass in preemptive discrediting. She wasn't just explaining why I was gone. She was laying the groundwork for what would happen if I ever came back. If I returned and said, "They hurt me," the community would hear. She is crumbling again. If I said, "They stole from me," the community would hear. She is paranoid. If I said, "I am angry," the community would hear. She is unstable. My mother had taken my greatest strength, my ability to endure, to stay quiet, to hold the house up, and twisted it into a pathology. She had turned my silence into sickness. I took off the headphones. I felt sick, but I also felt a strange, cold clarity. I wasn't fighting a family dispute. I was fighting a public relations campaign. The next day, the phone rang. It was 11 in the morning. I was at my desk at the software company, debugging a line of code. My personal phone was face down on the desk. It vibrated. I picked it up. Unknown caller. I usually didn't answer unknown numbers, but something, an instinct, a vibration in the air, made me swipe the green button. Hello? Vivian. The voice was rough, familiar. It was my father. He hadn't called me in 2 years, not since the voicemail telling me I was too sensitive. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I forced my voice to remain flat. Hello, Dad. I expected shouting. I expected him to ask where I was. I expected him to ask about the trust. Instead, his voice was low, hurried. I don't know who you are talking to, or what you think you're doing, but you need to stop. I didn't say anything. I let the silence stretch. It was a power move I had learned from Marisol. Silence makes people nervous. It makes them fill the space. Your mother is a wreck. He said, "We got a call from the bank. They froze the accounts." Vivian, do you have any idea what that does to us? You are stealing from Grandma's trust. I said, "We are managing it," he snapped. "We are managing it for the family. You were never good with money. You would have wasted it. We are building a legacy here." "A legacy of fraud?" I asked. "Watch your mouth," he hissed. "You ungrateful little—" "Look, I am warning you. Don't embarrass your mother. If you drag this out, if you make this public, you are going to regret it. We have friends in this town. People know who we are. They know who you are. Is that a threat?" I asked. "It is reality." "Vivian, you are alone. We are a community. Don't pick a fight you can't win. Just let it go. Sign the papers the lawyers send you, and we can work something out. Maybe send you a little something to help with your rent. I am sure you are struggling." I almost laughed. A little something, my own money, offered back to me as a bribe. "I am not struggling. Dad," I said, "and I am not alone." I hung up. I stared at the phone. My hand was shaking. Just a little, not from fear, from adrenaline. Don't embarrass your mother. That was the commandment I had lived by for 34 years. That was the law of the Henderson house. The image came first. The truth came second. He hadn't called to apologize. He hadn't called to ask if I was happy. He had called to protect the brand. 2 hours later, the attack moved from the personal to the professional. I was called into the HR director's office. Her name was Linda, a kind woman who usually had a jar of candy on her desk. Today, there was no candy. She motioned for me to sit down. She looked uncomfortable. "Elena," she said, or, "Is it Vivian?" I froze. I hadn't told anyone at work about my name change. My employment documents were all under Elena Hart, as that was my legal name when I was hired. "It is Elena," I said. "Vivian was my birth name." I changed it legally over a year ago. She nodded, looking at a file on her desk. We received a complaint today through our anonymous ethics hotline. It is quite serious. The complainant alleges that you falsified your educational credentials and that you are currently the subject of a fraud investigation in your home state. The room seemed to tilt. They were coming for my job. They knew that if I lost my income, I would be vulnerable. If I was vulnerable, I might settle. I might sign their papers just to survive. It was classic pressure. Squeeze the target until they pop. Linda, I said, keeping my voice steady, I have never falsified a document in my life. My degree is legitimate. My name change was a legal process approved by a judge in this county. I can provide you with the court order. But the fraud investigation? She asked. I am the victim of the fraud, not the perpetrator. I said, my identity was stolen by family members who are currently under audit. This complaint, I took a breath. This complaint is a retaliation tactic. They are trying to discredit me because I caught them. Linda looked at me. She was assessing me. I wasn't the unstable girl from my mother's stories. I was her senior analyst. I was the woman who had fixed the billing integration last month. I was the woman who brought donuts on Fridays. I can provide you with everything. I said, the court order for the name change, my transcripts, and a letter from the forensic accountant I have hired to investigate the theft of my identity. Linda sighed. She closed the file. Okay, Elena, I believe you. But corporate requires me to document this. Bring me the papers tomorrow. I walked back to my desk. My legs felt like lead. They were trying to burn down my new life. They didn't care if I starved. They didn't care if I was homeless. In fact, they probably preferred it. If I was broken, I fit the narrative. If I was successful, I was a contradiction. I spent the night organizing my defense. I printed the court order. I printed my transcripts. I asked Dahlia to write a statement confirming that I was the whistleblower, not the suspect. I included a copy of my therapy attendance log, redacted for privacy, but showing a pattern of consistent, healthy engagement. I was building a wall of paper, facts against fiction. The next evening, Marisol knocked on my door. She held a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. You look like you're preparing for a siege, she said, nodding at the stacks of paper on my coffee table. I am, I said. She poured the wine. Do you want to talk about it? I hesitated. The old Vivian would have said no. The old Vivian would have said, I don't want to burden you. The old Vivian would have been terrified that if Marisol knew the messiness of my family, she would back away. But I wasn't Vivian anymore. They tried to get me fired today. I said. Marisol didn't flinch. She sat down on the floor next to the coffee table. Tell me. I told her everything. I told her about the graduation, the birth certificate, the trust, the fake charity, the call from my dad, the HR complaint. When I finished, Marisol didn't offer platitudes. She didn't say, but they are your family. She took a sip of wine and set the glass down hard. That is not a family, she said. That is a crime syndicate. I laughed. It was a weak sound, but it was real. I have a meeting with my lawyer next week. I said, Dahlia thinks we have enough to file an injunction. I will drive you. Marisol said. No, I said automatically. You have work. It is. Marisol held up a hand. Elena, shut up. I am driving you. You are not walking into a war zone alone. I looked at her. I looked at the way she sat there, solid and unmovable in my living room. Okay, I said. Thank you. The simple act of saying yes felt like breaking a bone and resetting it properly. 2 days later, the other shoe dropped. I was at Dahlia's office. We were finalizing the affidavit for the injunction. Kessler called me this morning. Dahlia said, her face was grim. What happened? I asked. Did they unfreeze the trust? No. But he found out something else. He has a contact in the mayor's office back in your hometown. Apparently, there is a big event coming up. An event? The Community Impact Awards. Dahlia said, it is a banquet. Black tie, press. The mayor is going to be there, and the Henderson Promise Initiative is receiving the Organization of the Year award. I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. But that is not the kicker, Dahlia said. She turned her laptop around. It was a digital invitation. Join us as we honor the visionaries of our city. Special recognition to Vivian Henderson, founder of the Henderson Promise, for her legacy of resilience. They are giving me an award, I said. Dahlia nodded. And since Vivian Henderson is unavailable due to her condition, guess who is set to accept it on her behalf? Jenna, I said. And your mother, Dahlia added. They are doubling down. I said, my father warned me, don't embarrass your mother. This is what he meant. They are staging a coronation, if they walk up on that stage, Dahlia said, and accept that award in your name, while you are secretly suing them. The narrative cements. They become the heroes who are carrying the torch for the tragic, broken daughter. And if you attack them after that, you look like a monster. You look like the ungrateful wretch who crawled out of the woodwork to sue the saints who honored her. When is it? I asked. 2 weeks, Dahlia said. November 14th. 2 weeks. I stared at the screen. I saw the timeline in my head. They were betting that I would stay hidden. They were betting that I was too scared, too humiliated, too easy to live with to make a scene. They were counting on the Vivian who cleaned up the mess. Not the Vivian who made one. We have to stop it, I said. We have to file the injunction now. We have to get a judge to forbid them from using my name. We can try, Dahlia said, but courts move slow, and injunctions are tricky. We might not get a hearing in 2 weeks. I stood up. I walked to the tiny window in Dahlia's office that looked out at a brick wall. I thought about the empty seat at my graduation. I thought about the vomiting in the bathroom. I thought about the cake that said, "You did it." They had stolen my moment. Now they were creating a fake one to replace it. They were going to put my face on a screen, play sad music, and weep for me while the town applauded. They were going to use my name to raise another $50,000 if the law doesn't stop them. I said, turning back to Dahlia. Then what? She asked. Then I go. I said. Dahlia looked at me. Her eyebrows shot up. You go to the banquet? I go to the banquet. I said, it is risky. Elena, it is high drama. It could backfire. I know. I said, but they are building a play. They have written a script. They have cast the actors. They have sold tickets. I walked back to the table and looked at the invitation again. The only thing they forgot, I said, is that the main character isn't dead. I looked at Dahlia. Prepare the injunction. File the papers. Do everything by the book. But book me a flight and get me a ticket to that dinner. Dahlia smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. I will drive you to the airport, she said. I went home that night and didn't sleep. I lay in bed, listening to the rain. I wasn't shaking anymore. I was calibrating. I thought about my father's threat. Don't embarrass your mother. I wouldn't embarrass her. Embarrassment is for accidents. Embarrassment is for spinach in your teeth or tripping on the stairs. This wasn't going to be embarrassment. This was going to be an apocalypse. The legal system is a machine designed to grind rocks into sand, but it does so at a glacial pace. I learned this on a Tuesday morning. 3 days after I had instructed Dahlia to declare war, we had filed for emergency relief. It was a terrifying stack of paperwork. A motion for a temporary restraining order to stop the nonprofit from using my name or likeness. A petition to freeze the trust distributions immediately, and a preservation order to prevent them from shredding the financial records of the Henderson Promise Initiative. I sat in Dahlia's office, watching her pace back and forth while she held her phone to her ear. She was on hold with the court clerk. The speakerphone was broadcasting a tinny, looped orchestral track that sounded like a music box winding down. Finally, the music stopped. Counsel, the clerk's voice said, sounding bored and distant. The judge has reviewed the motion for the preliminary injunction. And? Dahlia asked. She stopped pacing. The docket is full for the next 2 weeks. The earliest available slot for a hearing is November 20th. I felt the blood drain from my face. November 20th. That is too late. Dahlia snapped. The event we are seeking to enjoin, the fundraising banquet where the plaintiff's identity is being misappropriated, is scheduled for the 14th. If we wait until the 20th, the damage is already done. The defamation is complete. I am sorry. Counsel, the clerk said, not sounding sorry at all. Unless there is an imminent threat of physical harm, the judge cannot bump the existing criminal cases. The schedule stands. November 20th. At 9 a.m, Dahlia hung up the phone. She slammed it down on the desk hard enough to make her coffee mug jump. I stared at the calendar on the wall. The 14th was 6 days away. They are going to do it, I said. My voice sounded hollow. They are going to put my face on that screen. They are going to tell the story. The mayor will be there. The press will be there. Once it is on the news, once it is in the papers, once it is out. Dahlia finished for me. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. Even if you win later, even if you prove they lied, the public will remember the gala. They will remember the tears. You will just be the bitter woman who sued a charity. I put my head in my hands. I felt the old, familiar weight of the Henderson family machinery crushing me. They always won. Not because they were smarter, but because they were faster. They moved with the speed of shamelessness. While I was stuck waiting for permission, waiting for hearings, waiting for the rules to work, I need to know, I whispered. Know what? Dahlia asked. I need to know how it started. I need to know why. I went back to my apartment that night, but I didn't sleep. The court's delay had unlocked a door in my mind I had kept bolted for years. I needed to understand the architecture of the cruelty. You don't just accidentally forget a graduation. You don't just accidentally turn your sister into a ghost. I opened my laptop. I navigated to a login page I hadn't visited in 4 years. It was the family's shared cloud account. My father had set it up years ago to share photos and manage the household bills. I had removed myself from it when I left. But I remembered the master password. My father was a creature of habit. He used the street address of his childhood home followed by the year he was married. I typed it in. 24 Maple 1983. Access granted. My heart hammered against my ribs. I felt like an intruder in my own history. I bypassed the photos. I didn't want to see the smiling faces of the last 3 Christmases. I went to the Documents folder, then to Notes, then to Drafts. My family used the Drafts folder of the shared email account as a way to leave notes for each other without actually sending emails. It was a digital refrigerator door. I scrolled back, way back, past the grocery lists, past the reminders to call the plumber. I found a draft dated May 15th, 2019, 3 days before my graduation. The subject line was blank. The author was Jenna. Mom, I talked to Dad. We are not going on Saturday. Seriously, if we go, we are just rewarding her for being dramatic about this whole degree thing. She has been insufferable about it for months. If she thinks she matters, she will keep expecting things. We need to set a baseline. Let her sit there. She will get over it, and she will be much easier to manage when she realizes we are not jumping through her hoops. Tell her it was an emergency. She believes everything. I stared at the screen. The white light burned my eyes. If she thinks she matters, she will keep expecting things. It wasn't negligence. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't even hatred. Really, it was management. It was a cold, calculated strategy to lower my market value. If I felt important, I might demand respect. If I felt celebrated, I might realize I was their equal. So they had to crush the milestone to keep the hierarchy intact. She will be much easier to manage. I was livestock to them, too. I was a resource to be husbanded, kept docile, and harvested when necessary. I closed the draft. I felt a nausea so profound I had to close my eyes and breathe through my nose for a full minute. I went deeper. I needed to see the trust files. Kessler, the new lawyer, had uploaded the digitized files to a secure portal for Dahlia to review. I had the login. I opened the folder labeled Estate of Eleanor Henderson. I scrolled through the legalese, the asset lists, the tax returns, and then I saw a file name that made my breath catch. Letter _to_, Vivian _D_O _not _open PDF. It was in a subfolder labeled Miscellaneous Correspondence. I clicked it. It was a scan of a handwritten letter on my grandmother's stationery. The paper was yellowed, the handwriting spidery but firm. My dear Vivi, if you are reading this, I am gone, and you have turned 30. I have instructed your father to give this to you on your birthday, along with the news of the trust. I know you, my sweet girl. I know you carry the weight of that house on your shoulders. I have watched you shrink yourself to fit into the spaces they leave for you. I have watched you apologize for taking up air. I saved this money for you not to buy things, but to buy freedom. I want you to know that you are the strongest of them all. But you do not know it yet. They need you to be weak so they can feel big. Do not let them make you small. Vivi, take this and go. Make a life that is yours. You were never meant to be the glue. You were meant to be the bird. Love, Grandma. I let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. They had kept it. They had not only stolen the money, they had stolen her voice. They had stolen the one person who saw me. She had left me a map out of the labyrinth, and they had buried it so they could keep me in the maze. You were meant to be the bird. I touched the screen. I traced the signature. I wasn't the unstable daughter. I wasn't the fragile failure. I was the one Grandma Eleanor had bet on. The next morning, Dahlia called me. I found the money. She said, her voice was grim. Where? I asked. She shared her screen with me. It was a complex web of transactions. They were smart enough not to write checks directly to themselves. Dahlia explained. The nonprofit pays out student support grants and curriculum development fees to a vendor called Aspire Solutions LLC. Who is Aspire Solutions? I asked. I ran a corporate search. Dahlia said, it is a Delaware LLC, anonymous ownership, but I followed the money. Aspire Solutions has a bank account that pays exactly 2 bills every month, the rent on a luxury apartment in the Uptown District and the lease on a Range Rover, Jenna's apartment. I said, and Jenna's car. Exactly. Dahlia said, the charity is a funnel. Donors put money in to help students like Vivian, and the money flows out to pay for Jenna's lifestyle. Your mother takes a salary as executive director, which is legal but morally bankrupt given the fraud. But Jenna is laundering the money through a shell company. That is a felony. I said, that is 5 felonies. Dahlia corrected. Then why can't we stop the banquet? I asked. If we show this to the judge, we can, Dahlia said, but not before the 14th. The forensic report isn't certified yet. We need bank subpoenas to prove the ownership of Aspire Solutions. And banks take 30 days to respond. We know it is true, but we can't prove it in court by Saturday. I felt the walls closing in again. However, Dahlia said, there is a development. What? The nonprofit's lawyer called me. They want to mediate. Mediate? They are spooked. Dahlia said, Kessler froze the trust distributions. They know someone is looking. They don't know who exactly. Kessler kept your identity vague. Just said beneficiary inquiry. But they want to quiet the noise before their big night. They have requested a settlement conference. Tomorrow. I want to go. I said immediately. Elena, Dahlia warned, you don't have to. I can go for you. No. I said, I want them to see me. I want them to know who they are dealing with. We met at a neutral location, a sterile conference room in a high-rise downtown, miles away from the life I had built. I arrived early. I wore a navy blue suit, sharp and tailored. I wore my hair pulled back. I wore no makeup to hide my face. I looked like what I was, a woman who managed million-dollar software implementations. Dahlia sat next to me, her notebook open. The door opened. My mother walked in first. She looked older. Her hair was still that perfect, stiff blonde, but her face was tighter, drawn with lines of tension she had tried to fill with Botox. She was wearing a soft pink cardigan, projecting the image of the harmless grandmother. Then Jenna entered. She looked expensive. She was wearing a designer dress that I knew, thanks to Dahlia, had been paid for by the student support grant. She carried a leather portfolio and looked annoyed. as if this meeting were a scheduling conflict with her Pilates class. And then they saw me. My mother stopped dead. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Vivian?" she whispered. I didn't stand up. I didn't smile. I just looked at her. "Hello, Mother." The lawyer, a slick man named Mr. Trent, looked between us. He clearly didn't know the full extent of the family dynamic. He just saw a reunion. "Oh, Vivian." My mother rushed forward. Her eyes filled with tears instantly. It was a reflex, a faucet she could turn on and off. She reached out to hug me. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just sat there, rigid as iron. She stopped inches from me, sensing the wall I had put up. She hovered, unsure. "We have missed you so much," she choked out. "We have been looking everywhere. Why did you run away? We were so worried." She reached into her oversized purse and pulled out a gift bag. It was blue, with tissue paper sticking out. I brought you this," she said, her voice trembling. "I have been carrying it around, just hoping I would see you. It is the jam you like, from the market, and some vitamins. You always looked so pale." The jam, the vitamins. It was a precision strike. She was trying to trigger the regression. She wanted me to be the pale, sickly daughter who needed her mother's jam and medical advice. She wanted me to feel guilty for making her carry a gift bag around for years. I looked at the bag. Then I looked at her. "You can put it on the table," I said. My voice was cool, stripped of all emotion. My mother recoiled as if I had slapped her. She set the bag down and sank into the chair opposite me, weeping into a tissue. Jenna didn't cry. She sat down, crossed her legs, and looked at me with cold, assessing eyes. "You look good, Vivian," she said. "Or is it Elena now? We heard you changed your name. A little dramatic, don't you think? Identity theft is dramatic." "Jenna," I said, "changing my name was just paperwork. Mr. Trent cleared his throat. "Okay, let us keep this productive. We are here to discuss the status of the Henderson Family Educational Trust and the misunderstandings regarding the nonprofit." "There is no misunderstanding," Dahlia said, cutting in. "Your clients have been forging my client's signature to embezzle funds from a trust she was never notified of. Furthermore, they are operating a fraudulent charity that uses her likeness to solicit donations under false pretenses." Jenna laughed. It was a dry, sharp sound. "Fraudulent?" Jenna said. "We honored her. We built a legacy for her. Look at her. She ran away. She abandoned us. We took that pain and turned it into something beautiful. We have helped dozens of students. We know about Aspire Solutions." "Jenna," I said softly. The room went deadly silent. Jenna's eyes widened, just a fraction. The mask slipped. For a second, I saw the panic. I saw the terrifying realization that I wasn't the idiot sister anymore. I had seen the ledger. She recovered quickly. She leaned forward, placing her manicured hands on the table. "Look, Vivian," she said, her voice dropping to a confidential purr. "Let's be adults here. We know you are angry about the graduation. We get it. It was a misunderstanding. But look at what we have built. The Henderson Promise is a force for good, and you are the face of it." She slid a piece of paper across the table. "We are prepared to offer you a role," she said. "You can come back. We will announce that you have been found. We will say you have completed your journey of healing. You can be the official spokesperson. You can stand on stage with us." She tapped the paper. "And of course, there is a compensation package. We can unlock the trust. We can give you a lump sum payout of $50,000. And a private apology from Dad. He feels terrible." "Really?" I looked at the offer. $50,000. They had stolen $400,000 from the trust. They had raised who knows how much through the nonprofit, and they were offering me $50,000 to put the collar back on. They didn't want a sister. They wanted a prop. They wanted the poster child to come home and smile so the donations would keep flowing. It was the ultimate insult. They thought I was for sale. I stood up. My mother looked up. Hopeful. "Vivian? I am not coming back." I said, "I don't want your money. I don't want a job. Then what do you want? Jenna snapped, her patience fraying. I want you to take my name off the website. I said, I want you to take my photo down. I want you to return every dollar you stole from the trust to the estate, and I want the nonprofit to submit to an independent external audit. Jenna's face twisted. It was a look of pure, unadulterated ugliness. You are selfish, she hissed. You have always been selfish. We built this family's reputation from nothing. We are doing important work, and you want to destroy it because you didn't get a cake 5 years ago? I leaned over the table. I didn't want a cake, Jenna. I wanted a family. But since I don't have one, I will settle for the truth. I turned to the lawyer. Mr. Trent, there will be no settlement. We will see you in court on the 20th. I walked out. I heard my mother wailing as the door closed. Vivian, please, the jam. I walked to the elevator, my heart pounding a steady, furious rhythm. I didn't take the jam. The night before the banquet, I was back in Briarhaven. I sat on my balcony, watching the rain hit the streetlights. I felt drained. The mediation had confirmed everything. There was no remorse. There was only strategy. They truly believed they were the heroes of the story. And I was the villain for trying to stop them. My phone buzzed. It was a direct message on Instagram. It was from a user I didn't know. Sarah_volunteer_22. I opened it. Hi. I don't know if you will see this. I am a volunteer for the Henderson Promise. I have been helping set up for the gala tomorrow. I saw your photo on the banner and, I don't know, something feels weird. Your sister keeps talking about you like you are gone, but you look so alive in the picture. Anyway, I thought you should see this. Attached was a photo. It was taken inside the hotel ballroom. The lights were dim, but the stage was lit. Hanging above the podium was a massive banner, 10 feet tall. It was the graduation photo, the one I had taken alone, the one where I smiled despite the nausea. But they had edited it. They had made it black and white. They had added a filter to make me look ethereal, ghostly, and across the bottom, in giant gold letters, she never gave up. I stared at the image. She never gave up. The irony was so sharp it drew blood. I had gave up. I gave up on them. I gave up on being their doormat. I gave up on the lie. But they were using my survival as a slogan for their fraud. They were using my face to sell tickets to a dinner where they would celebrate themselves. I looked at the time. 7 p.m. The banquet was tomorrow at 6. The injunction wouldn't happen until next week. If I stayed home, the banner would go up, the speech would be made, the lie would be televised. If I stayed home, I was agreeing to be the ghost. I remembered Grandma's letter. You were meant to be the bird. Birds don't ask for permission to fly, and they don't hide when the storm comes. I stood up. I walked into my bedroom and pulled my suitcase out of the closet. I wasn't going to wait for the judge. I wasn't going to wait for the audit. I picked up my phone and called Dahlia. Pick me up. I said, Where are we going? She asked, though I could hear the smile in her voice. We are going to the banquet, I said. But I am not going as a guest. I packed my black dress, the one that made me look like an executive executioner. I packed the court documents. I packed the forensic report, and I packed the letter from my grandmother. I wasn't going to beg for my identity back. I was going to walk onto that stage and take it. I was going to show them exactly what happens when the structural beam decides to move. The house falls down. The ballroom of the Grand Hotel smelled of prime rib, expensive perfume, and old money. It was a scent I knew well from the periphery of my childhood, the smell of the events my parents attended while I stayed home to watch the dog. But tonight, the air felt different. It felt heavy, charged with the static electricity of 1,000 lies rubbing against each other. I walked in through the side entrance, Marisol beside me. We were not on the guest list, but Dahlia had known the caterer, and a side door had been left unlatched. It was a small breach in the fortress, but it was all we needed. I was dressed in a black sheath dress, simple and sharp, with no jewelry except for a small silver watch. I wore my hair pulled back tight. I did not look like a founder. I did not look like a victim. I looked like a reckoning. Marisol squeezed my hand. Her grip was warm and rough, a reminder of the real world outside this gilded cage. "We are just here to watch," she whispered, "until you say otherwise." We found a spot near the back of the room, standing in the shadows behind the last table of donors. The room was bathed in amber light. There were 300 people seated at round tables covered in satin. Centerpieces of white lilies towered over plates of half-eaten beef, and there, dominating the stage, was the banner. It was 10 feet tall. My face, blown up to billboard size, looked out at the crowd. They had used the graduation photo, but they had airbrushed the exhaustion from under my eyes. They had made me look ethereal, saintly, and tragically absent. She never gave up. The irony tasted like aluminum in my mouth. The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the room. A spotlight hit the podium, and my mother walked out. She looked magnificent. She was wearing a floor-length gown of midnight blue velvet. Her hair was coiffed into a helmet of perfection. She gripped the lectern with both hands, lowering her head for a moment as if gathering her strength. It was a move I had seen her practice in the mirror when I was 12. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling just enough to register as brave. "Thank you all for being here, for believing in the promise." She looked up, her eyes glistening. 7 years ago, our family was shattered. We watched a bright, beautiful light flicker and fade. My daughter, Vivian, was a girl who felt too much. She carried the weight of the world in her heart until it broke her. When she left us, when she chose to walk into the silence, we thought we had lost her forever. A murmur of sympathy rippled through the crowd. I saw a woman at the table nearest to me dab her eyes with a napkin, but Vivian did not want us to mourn. My mother continued, her voice gaining strength. She wanted us to work. She wanted us to build a raft for other drowning souls. And that is what the Henderson Promise is. It is Vivian's voice. Speaking through us, it is her legacy, turning pain into power. I watched the room. I watched the emotional buy-in happen in real time. It was a transaction. My mother sold them a tragedy, and they paid her in tears and validation. Phones lit up around the room. I heard the soft ding of notifications. "If you are moved by Vivian's story," my mother said, pointing to a QR code projected on the screen next to my giant face, "please give. Help us save the next Vivian." I watched the woman near me pick up her phone, scan the code, and tap the screen. She just donated, maybe $50, maybe $500. It wasn't just a lie anymore. It was an economy. My absence was the product. And business was booming. I felt a cold, hard stone form in my stomach. Dahlia was right. If I let this night end, if I let them leave this room with this story cemented in their minds, I would never get my name back. I would be the tragic saint forever, and my sister would drive a Range Rover paid for by my ghost. My mother stepped back, wiping a tear. The applause was thunderous. People stood up. They cheered for the brave mother who had turned her grief into gold. The master of ceremonies, a local news anchor with a tan that looked like wood stain, took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we are honoring the visionaries, and there is no vision clearer than one born of love. It is my privilege to present the Community Impact Honor to the founder of the Henderson Promise Initiative, Vivian Henderson." The applause surged again. "And accepting on her behalf," the MC said, "is the woman who has carried the torch while her sister heals. Please welcome Jenna Alden." Jenna stood up from the front table. She smoothed her dress, a shimmering silver thing that caught the light like a knife blade. She wore a look of humble reluctance, as if she were stepping into the spotlight only because she had to. She walked up the stairs to the stage. She hugged our mother. They held hands, a united front of blonde ambition. Jenna reached for the award, a heavy crystal obelisk. I looked at Marisol. "Now?" Marisol whispered. "Now." I said, "I didn't run. I didn't shout. I simply walked out of the shadows and into the center aisle." The room was focused on the stage, so no one noticed me at first. I walked with a steady, rhythmic pace. My heels clicked against the parquet floor. A sharp, staccato sound that cut through the applause. I passed the first row of tables, then the second. Jenna was leaning into the microphone. "Vivian couldn't be here tonight," Jenna said, her voice soft. "She is a private person. She is too humble to accept this kind of acclaim. She asked me to tell you—" "Excuse me." My voice wasn't loud, but it projected. I had spent years managing doctors and administrators. I knew how to throw my voice so it landed in the back of a room. Jenna stopped mid-sentence. She squinted against the spotlight, looking down into the dark aisle. The room went silent, the kind of silence where you can hear the ice melting in the glasses. I kept walking. I stepped into the pool of light at the foot of the stage. I looked up at them. My mother, clutching her velvet gown. Jenna, holding the crystal award. "Who is that?" someone whispered at a front table. Jenna's face went slack. The color drained out of it so fast she looked gray. My mother made a sound like a strangled bird. I walked up the stairs. 1, 2, 3. I didn't look at the audience yet. I looked at my sister. I walked to the podium. Jenna was frozen, her hand still gripping the microphone stand. I reached out and took the microphone from her. She let go of it as if it were red hot. I turned to face the room. 300 faces stared back at me. Confusion, curiosity. I took a breath. "My name is Vivian Henderson," I said. A gasp rippled through the room. It sounded like the air being sucked out of an airlock. I looked at the banner behind me, the giant, beatific face of the saint they had invented. Then I looked back at the crowd. "I am not humble," I said, "and I am not healing. And I certainly did not ask my sister to accept anything on my behalf." My mother moved then. She stepped forward, reaching for my arm. Her face was a mask of terror barely concealed by a rictus of concern. "Honey," she hissed, her voice low but audible to the front row. "Honey, not here. You are not well. We can talk about this outside. Please." She tried to herd me, to use her body to block me from the audience. She touched my elbow with that familiar, guiding pressure, the physical language of be quiet, be small, be easy. I stepped away from her touch. I turned on the microphone fully. "You chose here." "Mother," I said. My voice boomed through the speakers, steady and cold. "You chose here when you used my name to raise money. You chose here when you put my face on a banner 10 feet tall." I saw the mayor in the front row. He was frowning, looking from me to my mother. He sensed the script had broken. "Vivian." "Stop," Jenna said. She had recovered her voice, though it was thin and brittle. "You are making a scene. You are having an episode. Everyone, please. My sister is confused." I turned to Jenna. "I am not confused. Jenna, I am the most lucid person in this room." I looked back at the crowd. I saw the donors. I saw Pastor Halloway. I saw the people who had written checks because they believed the story. I did not found the Henderson Promise Initiative. I said, "I did not write the mission statement. I did not authorize the use of my image, my name, or my personal history for this organization." The room began to murmur, a low, angry buzz. "The story you have been told tonight is a fabrication." I continued, "I did not leave my family because I was fragile. I did not leave because I was mentally ill. I left because my identity was being erased. And for the last 3 years, while I have been working a job and paying taxes in another state, this organization has been collecting money in my name." "Lies," my father shouted. He was standing up at table 4. His face was purple. He looked like a man watching his house burn down. "She is lying. She is sick. Get her off the stage." I looked at him, for the first time in my life. I didn't feel the urge to shrink. I felt tall. "I have filed a petition for an injunction in the Superior Court this morning," I said, keeping my eyes on the audience. "I have requested a full independent audit of the nonprofit's finances. Until that audit is complete, I am asking every person in this room to pause your donations." "You ungrateful bitch," Jenna hissed. The microphone caught it. The room gasped again. Jenna realized her mistake instantly. She clamped her hand over her mouth. But the damage was done. The saintly sister, the martyr who carried the torch, had just called the beneficiary an ungrateful bitch on a hot mic. Then, movement in the back. A young woman stood up. She was wearing a volunteer lanyard. She looked terrified, her hands shaking. But she stood up. It was Sarah, the one who had messaged me. She walked toward the stage, not all the way up, but to the edge of the press pit. "Is it true?" she asked. Her voice was small, but in the stunned silence, it carried. Jenna glared at her. "Sit down. Sarah." "No," Sarah said. She looked at me, then at Jenna. "You told us she was in a facility. You told the staff that if anyone asked about Vivian, we were supposed to say she was unreachable for her own safety. You told us not to forward mail." I looked at Sarah. "They told you I was unstable so you wouldn't ask why I never showed up." I said. Sarah turned to the room. She looked at the donors. "They told us to redirect all questions about the scholarship funds to the director." She said, "They said the files were confidential because of medical privacy. But we never saw any scholarships. We just saw fundraising galas. The fracture happened then. It wasn't a loud crack. It was the sound of 300 people simultaneously realizing they had been played. Chairs scraped against the floor. People began to stand up, not to applaud, but to distance themselves. The mayor signaled to his aide, and they began to move toward the exit, their faces grim. My mother looked around the room. She saw her social capital evaporating. She saw the eyes of her friends turning cold. "Vivian, please," she begged, tears streaming down her face. Real tears this time. Tears of panic. "You are ruining everything. Why are you doing this?" "We did this for you." "For me?" I asked. "Yes," Jenna shouted. She stepped forward, abandoning the act entirely. Her face was twisted with fury. "We made you a legend. You were nobody. You were a boring, invisible little secretary. We made you a founder. We made people care about you. We built this whole empire on your name. And you come here and destroy it because what? Because you are jealous? Because you want the money?" I looked at her. She stood there in her silver dress, vibrating with entitlement. She truly believed it. She believed that using me was a favor to me. She believed that my life was raw material for her success. I looked at the crystal award in her hand. Impact Honor. I stepped closer to her. I lowered the microphone just a fraction, so my voice wasn't booming, but intimate. Intimate enough to be heard by everyone. "I don't want the money, Jenna," I said, "and I don't want the empire." "Then what?" she screamed. "What do you want?" The room held its breath. I looked at my mother. I looked at my father, who was standing in the aisle, defeated. I looked at Jenna. I thought about the empty seat in Section C. I thought about the cake that said, "You did it." I thought about the 3 hours I sat in that stadium, waiting for a family that was eating brunch. "I just wanted you to come to my graduation." I said. The words hung in the air. Small, simple, devastating. It stripped away the lawsuits. It stripped away the fraud. It stripped away the nonprofit and the politics and the money. It revealed the core of the rot. I wasn't a monster. I wasn't a vengeful spirit. I was a daughter who had achieved something, and whose family had punished her for it. Jenna opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The pettiness of their crime, the sheer, mundane cruelty of it, was suddenly laid bare against the backdrop of this $1 million gala. They had committed fraud to cover up the fact that they simply hadn't cared enough to show up. I placed the microphone on the podium. It made a thud that sounded like a gavel. I turned around and walked down the stairs. The crowd parted for me. People pulled their chairs in to let me pass. They didn't speak to me. They stared at me with a mixture of awe and shame. Shame that they had been part of the erasure. Marisol was waiting at the door. She opened it, and the cool air of the hallway hit my face. "Vivian!" It was my father. I didn't stop. I walked into the corridor, the plush carpet muffling my steps. They followed me. Of course they did. They couldn't let the scene end on my terms. They needed the last word. My father grabbed my arm just as we reached the elevators. His grip was hard, painful. Marisol stepped forward, her eyes flashing, But I held up a hand. I could handle this. You are cruel. My father spat. His face was gray, his eyes wild. Do you know what you just did? You destroyed your mother. You destroyed our reputation. We will be laughed out of this town. I looked at his hand on my arm. He let go. Sensing the shift in gravity, I didn't destroy anything. Dad, I said, I just turned the lights on. My mother caught up, breathless, her mascara running in dark streaks down her face. She grabbed my hands. Her palms were clammy. Vivian, let it go, she begged. We can fix this. We can tell them it was a misunderstanding. We can say you were confused. But we forgave you. Just go back in there, please, for the family. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had birthed me, who had raised me to be a structural beam, silent and load-bearing. She was still trying to draft the press release. She was still trying to direct the play. I am not in the family. Mother, I said, I resigned 3 years ago. Jenna was the last to arrive. She didn't touch me. She stood 10 feet away, leaning against the wall, her arms crossed over her chest. She looked at me with pure, distilled hatred. You have no proof, she hissed. You have a few receipts? A few drafts? The court will laugh at you. You have no proof that matters. I looked at my sister. I saw the fear behind the hate. She knew about Dahlia. She knew about the forensic report. She knew about Aspire Solutions. She was bluffing, trying to bully reality into submission one last time. I pressed the elevator button. The arrow lit up. Proof isn't the point. Jenna, I said. The elevator doors chimed and slid open. I stepped inside. Marisol followed me. I turned to face them one last time. My father, shaking with impotent rage. My mother, weeping for her lost status. My sister, staring into the abyss of her own making. Patterns are, I said. I pressed the button for the lobby. The doors slid shut, sealing them away. We rode down in silence. The hum of the elevator was the only sound. When we walked out of the hotel, the rain had stopped. The air was crisp and clean, smelling of wet pavement and the sea. Marisol looked at me. Are you okay? She asked. I took a deep breath. I filled my lungs with the cold air. I wasn't Vivian Henderson, the girl who waited. I wasn't Elena Hart, the woman who hid. I was someone new, someone who had burned the house down and walked out of the ashes with her own name. I looked at the city lights reflecting in the puddles. Yes, I said, I am okay. I hailed a cab. We got in. Where to? The driver asked. Home, I said. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly where that was. Thank you for listening to this story. Revenge isn't always about destruction. Sometimes, it is simply about the refusal to be erased. I hope Vivian's journey resonated with you. I would love to hear your thoughts. Where are you listening from? Have you ever had to reclaim your own narrative from people who tried to rewrite it? Please share your experiences in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice, resilience, and the quiet power of truth. Until next time.